Good morning, everybody. I'm Xander Richards, and I'm here with our chief political reporter, Judith, today. And well, it's been quite a busy morning for us already. What have you been up to so far, Judith?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of obviously just looking at post-election stories that's still going on. Obviously, the election was Thursday, but it seems like it was about a month ago now. So, but one thing I've been doing this morning is talking to one of the two women who were elected to the Western Isles Council. So there's quite a lot of media attention in that council in the run-up to the election because for a decade, I think it was, there was no female councillors. But on Thursday, two SNP councillors were elected who were both women. So I've been having a really interesting chat with her. I'll be writing that up for later today, probably.
So all of the independents on the council, because the largest group on the Western Isles Council is independents.
Yeah. So it's
Every single one of them is a male.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. So there's now two women, which is progress from zero, but obviously there's still a long way to go. But it was really interesting having a chat to her because she was talking about issues such as how, because if you work for the council, then you can't stand for election, and a lot of women work for the council, which is one of the kind of barriers. So it's quite interesting to kind of find out about the local issues that affect why women stand. She was saying there's a lot of women who are in influential roles, but in this circumstance, it makes it more difficult. And she was also talking about how travelling in the islands can be quite difficult. So hopefully with the advent of Zoom and how people are much more used to using Zoom and things now, then that might make it a bit easier for people to work as councillors. So it was a very interesting chat and an interesting insight into some of the issues there. So what about yourself? I see you're in Parliament there today.
Yeah, I've come over to Holyrood today. I've come over. There's a few committees on at the moment. They're thrashing out the miners' pardon bill, but this afternoon there's a debate on the Scottish Government's international work, which will probably see very little actual work get done and quite a lot of sniping at each other. Well, I imagine the Tories are going to be saying that they shouldn't be going abroad and focusing on trying to, I don't know, build international links when there's a cost of living crisis at home. It'll just be the same lines we hear again and again and again. I mean, they've definitely been going into what looks a little bit like panic mode ever since the local elections. Not that they had anything to do with independence, really. But I mean, I was just speaking to our colleagues over at the Herald who have run a story today on the Conservatives criticising, well, the eyebrows are being raised at the timing of the display of the Declaration of Arbroath next year. I think they're concerned that if people see a document from 700 years ago, they might want to vote yes more than no, which seems a little bit of a stretch, to say the least. So, I mean, yeah, that's what we'll see. I mean, realistically, all the eyes are going to be on the other Parliament down in London this afternoon.
Absolutely. Yeah, just before we get into that, it's interesting the whole aspect of Nicola Sturgeon's Washington trip. I think there's always this sniping, isn't there, when she goes off on foreign trips, and the idea that she shouldn't be, concentrating on international issues, it should be local issues. But I actually did a really interesting story earlier in the year, in which it was a researcher called Reuben Duffy, who was no relation, I hasten to add, but he did a report for the Constitution Society. It was published by the Constitution Society, even though it was his own views. But he was talking about how Scotland should be taking its place in the world stage, and this kind of idea that Westminster knows best and that Scotland shouldn't be off trying to attract international attention was completely wrong. He kind of said that other states, such as Bavaria, Quebec, places like that, they had that mechanism in place to do that. And he also pointed out that it goes back a long way in terms of when Jack McConnell was First Minister. Then, he started this process of getting Scotland onto the international stage. There was the Scotland-Malawi partnership. And so it goes back quite a long way. And it's not only now that, with independence playing into it, that I think it really attracts such criticism and controversy, when in fact, why shouldn't Scotland be doing this? Why should it all be coming from Westminster when, Scotland's a country in its own right? So it's interesting from that point of view.
It's definitely an easy story for some hacks. Whenever they see Nicola Sturgeon's going abroad, they can just ring up their mates for a line. It's just Yeah, it's a bit tiresome, to be honest.
Absolutely. As you were saying, yeah, lots of focus on Westminster today with the Queen's speech. So, and obviously one of the biggest headlines around that is the fact that the Queen herself won't be there, and it's Prince Charles which will be delivering it. So, that's attracted quite a bit of attention. But obviously, the content of it is going to be what's really interesting next, in terms of this is a bit of a crunch time for Boris Johnson after his poor showings in the local election. So really, he needs to kind of set out, policy and plans for the next few years that'll, tackle the cost of living crisis, that'll, appease people within his own party. It's going to be interesting to see what he can come up with, and whether, he can do enough, which is probably unlikely, but, it'll be interesting to see what he actually comes up with.
I was reading around a little bit for just these articles that have come out about what to expect from the Queen's speech and all of this. And I saw one of the ministers, whether it was Kit Malthouse or not, say that they're going to be laying down proposals to dynamize the United Kingdom. I mean, with leveling up the United Kingdom, dynamizing, I really don't know what that means. I really don't know what it means, but there's lots of these words getting thrown about. But yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the cost of living crisis, because I think it was Kit Malthouse, and he seemed to downplay any suggestion that there would be any more help on the way. I mean, Rishi Sunak's toyed with the idea of this windfall tax that, I mean, it doesn't really seem like the government is that interested in actually helping people with the cost of living crisis. Instead, it seems their focus is on the mess that they've made with Brexit, really. Like, I mean, the government in Northern Ireland is remaining frozen because the unionists are refusing to come to the table over the Brexit protocol. I mean, yeah, it's a situation that they've created.
Yeah, absolutely. And interesting reports today that Liz Truss might be ready to ditch the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is a kind of interesting one. And as you say, when they're interviewed about this, a lot of the response from Tories is, oh, well, the EU aren't being flexible enough or helping us in this. And it's a situation of the government's own creation. So, definitely they seem to think that the EU should now be bending to their will. But obviously, if they do ditch the protocol, then that's going to bring a huge clash with the EU. There's potential going to be a trade war. I mean, the effects of Brexit, which are already damaging enough, will be even more damaging. So, I mean, that's definitely going to rumble on that issue, because I guess they have to do something in terms of the Northern Ireland situation. But, what it'll be and how it'll satisfy everybody, I don't think they can. It was a creation that shouldn't have been there in the first place. So, it's very difficult.
If I had a pound for every time a government minister has threatened to ditch the Northern Ireland Protocol, though, it'd be an inflation-busting pay rise, to put it that way. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
Honestly, it's nonsense. They just say it all the time as like a negotiation tactic. They just fall back on these threats of ditching the protocol. And when it comes to actually trying to find a solution that works for Ireland, which obviously a lot of the people in Ireland are saying can be the protocol if it works correctly, they're just not coming to the table at all. But we'll see. I mean, there's supposed to be seven Brexit bills, I think I read, coming from the Queen's speech. So I mean, it's certainly not a done deal. I mean, get Brexit done back in 2019, and here we are in 2022
it's still ongoing.
Yeah.
That was of course, the front page today, Nicola Sturgeon talking about having a refreshing and very positive new case for Indy. So that kind of ties in with the Irish situation as well, in terms of the election results. She's kind of saying that obviously the results in Ireland kind of show that the Northern Ireland show there's a growing sense that the UK in its current state isn't serving the needs of Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland. So it's kind of interesting how that's kind of playing into this idea of the UK, on the brink of disintegration, and how that might, tie into what's happening in Scotland. So yeah, so even though the elections were very much local council elections, then it's interesting that these much bigger issues have come out of it, and people are having to kind of think about that now. But yeah, it's been an interesting one to watch and see what happens next. And I guess also, the impetus for a fresh Indy ref, you would think that's now the time to do it, because the council elections are over, and lots of people are waiting to see what happens next. So
that's what we were told, wasn't it, before before the council elections, that once they were done and dusted, then the focus would switch onto Indie Ref 2. And I mean, definitely in the last few days, it does seem like we've been hearing a lot more about the topic from the First Minister. So, I mean, it'll be pretty interesting, especially, I mean, reports last week of Boris Johnson considering an early general election because the cost of living crisis is apparently only going to get worse, and the economy is what causes governments to fall time and time again. It's always the economy. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he did call an early general election. Maybe 2022 is too early, but I mean, whenever he does call it, it's going to be a bit tricky for Douglas Ross if the Ukraine war's not over, because I mean, he doesn't think that we should be changing prime ministers or doing anything like that while the Ukraine war's on. So, I mean, yeah, we'll see. I imagine that rhetoric will fade away.
Excellent, brilliant. Well, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the Queen's speech that will be coming up really shortly. So with that, we better get cracking and
yeah, back to work.
Absolutely, you can read all the stories on the website today. So best way to keep up with what's happening.
Love it. All right. Well, yeah, better get back. So good to talk to you, Judith, and thanks very much, everybody, for tuning in.